The morning sun painted golden streaks across the sky as David pulled into the parking lot of the local farmers market. It was Saturday, and this had become their weekly tradition ever since his wife Lisa passed away 3 years ago. His 8-year-old daughter Amy sat in the back seat, already unbuckling her seatbelt before he had even turned off the engine. "Can we get the strawberry jam again today, Dad?" Amy asked, her eyes bright with excitement. She had her mother's eyes, David thought. The same warm brown that could light up a room. "Of course, sweetheart. Mrs. Johnson always saves the best jar for you," David replied, managing a smile. These Saturday mornings were both a blessing and a challenge. Amy loved the market, but for David, every corner held memories of Lisa. Used to love picking out fresh flowers here, always choosing the most colorful bouquet she could find. As they walked through the entrance, the familiar sounds and smells of the market surrounded them. Vendors called out their daily specials. Children laughed as they chased each other between the stalls, and the sweet scent of fresh bread mixed with the earthy smell of vegetables. Amy skipped ahead, her ponytail bouncing with each step, while David followed at a slower pace, his hands tucked deep in his jacket pockets. They made their usual rounds first. The fruit vendor, an elderly man named Roberto, always had the sweetest apples. Amy picked out 3 red ones, inspecting each one carefully like her mother used to do. Then they stopped at the bakery stall, where the owner's wife wrapped up a loaf of sourdough bread in brown paper, just the way Lisa used to buy it. "Dad, look at all those flowers!" Amy suddenly exclaimed, pointing toward the far end of the market where a colorful flower stand caught the morning light. "Can we go see them, please?" David hesitated for a moment. The flower stand had been Lisa's favorite spot. She would spend 20 minutes there every Saturday, touching the petals gently and asking about each variety. But Amy was already tugging at his sleeve, her face full of hope. "All right, but just for a few minutes," he said. Letting her lead the way, as they approached the flower stand, David's steps slowed. The vendor, a cheerful woman in her 50s, was arranging fresh sunflowers in tall buckets. The sight brought back a flood of memories. Lisa had always said sunflowers reminded her of happiness because they always turned toward the sun. No matter what, Amy ran ahead to look at the colorful display, while David hung back, trying to keep his emotions in. Check. That's when he noticed another customer at the stand. A woman was carefully examining a bouquet of white roses, holding them up to the light to check their freshness. Something about her posture, the way she tilted her head slightly to the side, made David's heart skip a beat. The woman had shoulder-length auburn hair that caught the sunlight in exactly the same way Lisa's used to. She was wearing a simple blue dress and had the same graceful way of moving that had first caught David's attention when he met Lisa 12 years ago. For a moment he couldn't breathe. "Dad?" Amy's voice suddenly rang out, louder than usual. "Dad, come here, look." David forced himself to move toward his daughter, but his eyes kept drifting back to the woman. Amy had stopped right in front of the flower stand, her small hand pointing directly at the auburn-haired woman. "Dad, she looks like Mommy," Amy whispered, but her whisper was the kind that 8-year-olds think is quiet but everyone can hear. The woman turned around at the sound of Amy's voice, and David felt the world tilt beneath his feet. The resemblance wasn't just similar, it was stunning. She had Lisa's face, the same gentle curve of her cheek, the same soft smile that seemed to reach her eyes. Even her height was exactly the same? "Oh my goodness," the woman said softly, looking down at Amy with surprise and curiosity. "What a sweet little girl you are." David stood frozen, unable to speak. His mind raced through possibilities. Could this be Lisa's cousin, a distant relative they had never met? But Lisa had always told him she was an only child, that her parents had died when she was young and she had no other family. Amy, however, had no such hesitation. She stepped closer to the woman, studying her face with the honest directness that only children possess. "You really do look like my mommy," Amy said matter-of-factly. "But she's in heaven now. She got sick and couldn't stay with us anymore." The woman's expression softened and she knelt down to Amy's level. "I'm so sorry to hear that, sweetheart. I'm sure your mommy was very beautiful and very loved." "She was," Amy nodded seriously. Daddy says I have her eyes, but you have her hair. And you smile like her too. David finally found his voice. I'm sorry, he said, stepping forward. My daughter is very observant, and well, you do have a remarkable resemblance to my late wife. The woman looked up at him, and David felt his breath catch again. Her eyes were the same unusual amber color as Lisa's, with the same golden flecks that seemed to sparkle in the sunlight. It was impossible. It had to be impossible. Please don't apologize, the woman said, standing up gracefully. I'm actually quite touched. My name is Rachel, by the way. Rachel Martinez. David, he replied, extending his hand. And this is Amy. Nice to meet you both, Rachel said, shaking David's hand. Her grip was firm but gentle, just like Lisa's had been. I have to say, this is quite unusual. Amy, you said I look like your mommy. Do you have a picture of her? David pulled out his phone with trembling fingers. He always kept his favorite photo of Lisa as his wallpaper, a picture from their last vacation together, where she was laughing at something Amy had said, her hair blowing in the ocean breeze. Her amber eyes sparkling with joy. He turned the phone toward Rachel and watched as her face went completely pale. Her hand flew to her mouth and she took a step backward. This is impossible, she whispered, staring at the photo. This is absolutely impossible. What's wrong? Amy asked, looking between the adults with concern. Rachel looked up at David, her amber eyes wide with shock. I need to sit down, she said quietly. This is I think we need to talk. David's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. There's a coffee shop just across the street, he managed to say. Would you Would you like to get some coffee? Or tea, we could talk there. Rachel nodded, still staring at the photo on David's phone. Yes, she said softly, I think that would be a very good idea. As they walked away from the flower stand, Amy between them, David couldn't shake the feeling that this chance meeting was about to change everything. The morning had started like any other Saturday, but something told him that nothing would ever be quite the same again. Rachel kept glancing at Amy as they walked, and David noticed how her eyes seemed to drink in every detail of his daughter's face. There was something in her expression that he couldn't quite read, recognition, perhaps, or maybe just the same shock that he was feeling, whatever was happening. Whatever impossible coincidence had brought them together at the flower stand. That morning, David knew that the truth, whatever it was about to unfold. And for the first time in 3 years, he felt like Lisa might somehow be reaching out to them from wherever she was, guiding them toward something they never knew they needed to find. The coffee shop across from the farmer's market was busy, but David managed to find a quiet corner table by the window. Rachel sat across from him, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea, while Amy colored in a coloring book the waitress had kindly brought over. The little girl seemed completely unaware of the tension between the adults, humming softly as she carefully filled in the petals of a flower with her purple crayon. David couldn't stop staring at Rachel. Every time she moved, every gesture she made reminded him of Lisa. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. The way she held her cup with both hands as if she was trying to warm herself from the inside out. Even the way she occasionally glanced at Amy with such gentle curiosity was exactly how Lisa used to look at children. I'm still having trouble believing this, Rachel said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. The resemblance is it's impossible to ignore. David nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. It was too hot, but he hardly noticed. Amy's right, you know. You don't just look like Lisa, you look exactly like her. It's almost like ... double quotes. He paused, unable to finish the sentence. Like looking at a ghost? Rachel finished for him, her amber eyes meeting his, something like that. David pulled out his phone again and scrolled through his photos. Here, look at this one. This was taken about 5 years ago, at Amy's 3rd birthday party. He showed Rachel the picture. Lisa was kneeling behind Amy, helping her blow out the candles on her birthday cake. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she was laughing at something someone had said off camera. Rachel stared at the photo for a long moment, then slowly reached into her purse and pulled out her own phone. "David," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "I need to show you something." She scrolled through her photos and then turned her phone toward him. The picture showed Rachel at what looked like a work party, wearing a similar ponytail and laughing at something off camera. The pose, the expression, even the way the light hit her face was nearly identical to Lisa's photo. David felt his heart stop. "When was this taken?" "About 6 months ago," Rachel replied. "My coworkers were always telling me I should be a model because I photograph well, but I never really paid attention to it. But looking at these photos side by side," she trailed off, shaking her head in disbelief. Amy looked up from her coloring book, noticing the phones on the table. "Are you showing her more pictures of Mommy?" she asked innocently. "Something like that, sweetheart," David said, his voice thick with emotion. Rachel leaned forward slightly, looking at Amy with intense curiosity. "Amy, can you tell me more about your Mommy? What was she like?" Amy's face lit up the way it always did when someone asked about Lisa. "She was the best mommy in the whole world," she said proudly. "She used to make pancakes that looked like animals, and she would read me stories every night before bed. She had the prettiest laugh, and she always smelled like vanilla because she used this special lotion." Rachel's eyes widened. "Vanilla lotion? Yeah, She got it from this special store, and she said it was her favorite smell in the whole world. She used to put it on my hands too, so we would smell the same." Amy went back to her coloring completely. Unaware of the impact of her words, David watched as Rachel's face went pale. "Rachel, are you okay?" She held up her hand, showing him her wrist. "Smell this," she said quietly. David leaned forward and caught the scent. It was unmistakable. Vanilla, with just a hint of something else. The exact same scent that Lisa had worn every day for as long as he had known her. "I've been using this lotion since I was a teenager," Rachel whispered. "I get it from a little shop downtown. The owner makes it herself, and she says I'm one of only 3 people who buy it regularly. I've always been obsessed with vanilla. I don't know why, but it's always made me feel safe somehow." David felt like the room was spinning. "Lisa bought her lotion from a little shop downtown too. She said the same thing, that the owner only had a few regular customers for that particular scent." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the coincidence settling over them. Amy continued coloring, occasionally asking for help with staying inside the lines, blissfully unaware that the adults were experiencing something that would change all their lives. "There's more," Rachel said finally. "David, I need to ask you something, and I hope you won't think I'm crazy. After everything that's happened in the last hour, I don't think anything could sound crazy." David replied. Rachel took a deep breath. "Was Lisa adopted?" David's coffee cup clattered against the saucer as he set it down too quickly. "How did you—" "Yes, she was. She was adopted when she was a baby." "Why?" "Because so was I," Rachel said, her voice barely audible. "I was adopted when I was 2 days old. I've been looking for information about my birth family for years, but the adoption agent sealed most of the records. All I know is that I was born at General Hospital downtown, and my birth mother was very young." David's mind was racing. "Lisa was born at General Hospital too, and she was adopted as a baby. She never knew anything about her birth family either." "What was her birthday?" Rachel asked, though something in her expression suggested she already knew the answer. "March 15th, 1990, David said. Rachel closed her eyes and took a shaky breath. "Mine is March 13th, 1990. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too warm, too full of impossible possibilities. David looked at Amy, who was now drawing what looked like a family of stick figures, a tall one, a shorter one with long hair, and a tiny one in the middle. "That's us," Amy announced, holding up her drawing. "That's Daddy, and that's Mommy, and that's me. We're at the park." Rachel looked at the drawing, and David saw tears forming in her eyes. "It's beautiful, Amy," she said softly. "Do you have a little girl too?" Amy asked. "No, sweetheart. I don't have any children. I don't have any family at all, actually." Amy looked up at her with the serious expression she got when she was thinking hard about something. "That's sad," she said simply, Everyone should have a family. David felt his heart breaking and healing at the same time. Rachel, he said carefully, I think we need to find out more about this, about your adoption and Lisa's adoption. Because if what I'm thinking is true, what are you thinking? Rachel asked, though her eyes suggested she was thinking the same thing. I think you might be Lisa's sister, her twin sister. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge. Neither of them was sure they were ready to cross. Rachel stared at him, her amber eyes wide with shock and something that might have been hope. That's impossible, she whispered. Isn't it? David thought about all the coincidences, all the similarities, all the impossible things that had led them to this moment. A week ago I would have said yes, but now I'm not so sure. Amy looked up from her drawing again, sensing the seriousness in their voices even if she didn't understand it. Are you okay, Rachel? You look like you're going to cry? Rachel reached across the table and gently touched Amy's hand. I'm okay, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're happy too. Are you happy? Amy asked. Rachel looked at David, then back at Amy, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I think I might be, she said quietly. I think I might be very happy indeed. That night, David couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Rachel's amber eyes, the way she held her coffee cup, and most of all, the impossible coincidences that had brought them together. Amy had fallen asleep easily, exhausted from their day at the farmer's market, but she had asked 3 times before bed when they would see the nice lady who looks like Mommy again. David had promised Rachel he would call her the next day, and they had exchanged phone numbers before parting ways. But now, lying in the darkness of his bedroom, he wondered if he was losing his mind. Could Lisa really have had a twin sister? And if so, why had she never known about it? He got up and walked to his closet, pulling out a small wooden box from the top shelf. Inside were Lisa's important papers, their marriage certificate, Amy's birth certificate, and Lisa's adoption papers. He had looked at them before, but only briefly, and only when he needed them for legal purposes after Lisa's death. By the light of his bedside lamp, David spread the papers out on his bed. Lisa's adoption certificate was dated March 17, 1990. 2 days after her birth. The adopting parents were listed as Robert and Susan Taylor, Lisa's adoptive parents who had died in a car accident when she was 19. The adoption agency was listed as Caring Hearts Adoption Services. David stared at the document, looking for any clue he might have missed before. At the bottom, in small print, he noticed something that made his heart race. There was a case. Number CH 1990-0847A, the A at the end caught his attention. In his experience with legal documents, letters like that usually indicated there was a series. BC, and so on. The next morning, David called Rachel before he lost his nerve. She answered on the second ring, and he could hear the same nervous energy in her voice that he was feeling. I've been awake all night thinking about yesterday, she said, before he could even say hello. Me too, David admitted. Rachel, I need to ask you something. Do you still have your adoption papers? Yes, I keep them in a safety deposit box at the bank. I've looked at them 1,000 times over the years, hoping to find some clue about my birth family. Why? David explained about the case number on Lisa's adoption certificate and his theory about the letter at the end. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. David, she said finally, I think we need to meet today. I think we need to see those papers together. They arranged to meet at the bank where Rachel kept her safety deposit box. David dropped Amy off at her best friend's house for a playdate, not wanting to get the little girl's hopes up until they knew more. Amy's friend, Katie's mother, Mrs. Chun, was happy to watch her for the afternoon. Take your time, Mrs. Chun said kindly. Amy told Katie all about meeting someone who looks like her mother. She seems very excited about it. David's stomach churned with nervous energy as he drove to the bank. What if they were wrong? What if this was all just a series of strange coincidences? But what if they were right? What if Lisa had had a twin sister all along, and neither of them had ever known? Rachel was waiting for him in the bank parking lot, and David could see she was just as nervous as he was. They barely spoke as they walked inside and were escorted to the private room where safety deposit boxes were opened. Rachel's hands were shaking as she inserted her key into the lock. The box was small, containing only a few documents and a small jewelry box. She pulled out a manila envelope and opened it carefully. "Here," she said, handing David a document that looked very similar to Lisa's adoption certificate. David's breath caught in his throat. Rachel Martinez, born March 13, 1990 at General Hospital. Adoption finalized March 17, 1990 by Caring Hearts Adoption Services. And at the bottom, in the same small print, was a case number. CH 1990-0847B, David whispered. Lisa's was. A, yours is B, that means. Rachel started, but couldn't finish the sentence. That means you were part of the same case, David said. You were adopted together, as twins. Rachel sank into the chair beside him, staring at the documents. All these years, she said quietly. All these years I've been looking for my family, and I had a sister. I had a twin sister. David felt tears burning behind his eyes. She looked. For you too, in her own way. She always said she felt like something was missing, like there was a part of her that was somewhere else. She used to dream about having a sister. I dreamed about having a sister too, Rachel said, her voice breaking. I used to imagine what she would look like, what her voice would sound like. I never imagined she would look exactly like me. They sat in silence for a moment, letting the truth sink in. Then Rachel opened the small jewelry box that had been in her safety deposit box. I've had this since I was a baby, she said, pulling out a small silver locket. My adoptive parents said it was the only thing that came with me from the adoption agency. I've never been able to open it. It seems to be stuck. David examined the locket carefully. It was tarnished with age, but he could see there was a small catch that had probably become stiff over the years. Using his thumbnail, he carefully worked at the catch until it finally popped open. Inside was a tiny black and white photograph, the kind that hospitals used to take of newborn babies. But this wasn't just one baby, it was two babies lying side by side, their tiny hands touching. Twins, Rachel breathed. We were twins. David looked closer at the photograph. On the back, in faded ink, someone had written Lisa and Rachel, born March 13, 1990. Wait, David said, confused. But Lisa's birth certificate says March 15th. Rachel looked at her own documents again. And mine says March 13th, but the photo says we were both born on March 13th. Maybe they changed the dates on purpose, David suggested. To make it harder for you to find each other? Some adoption agencies used to do that when they separated twins. Rachel stared at the photograph, tears streaming down her face. She was right there, she whispered. She was right there next to me, and then we were separated. David thought about Lisa, about all the time she had talked about, feeling incomplete about her dreams of having a sister. He thought about how she had always been drawn to twins whenever she saw them, how she would watch them with a wistful expression. Rachel, he said gently, I think we need to go to the adoption agency. I think we need to find out what really happened and why you were separated. Rachel nodded, wiping her eyes. But first, I think we need to do something else. I think we need to do a DNA test, just to be absolutely sure. You're right, David agreed. We need to be certain before we tell Amy that she has an aunt. They spent the rest of the afternoon at a clinic that offered same-day DNA testing. The technician, a friendly woman named Dr. Martinez, explained that results would be available within 24 hours for family relationship testing. Based on what you've told me, Dr. Martinez said, if you are indeed identical twins, the test will show a 99.9% probability of being siblings. Identical twins share virtually all of their DNA. As they left the clinic, David felt like he was walking through a dream. 24 hours ago, he had been a widowed father taking his daughter to the farmer's market. Now, he was waiting to find out if his late wife had had a twin sister who had been searching for her family for years. David, Rachel said as they stood by their cars, what if the test is positive? What if we really are? What if Lisa really was my sister? David looked at her, seeing Lisa's eyes looking back at him, but also seeing something new, hope, and maybe the beginning of healing for all of them. Then Amy will have the aunt she never knew she had, he said simply. And you'll have the family you've been looking for all your life. Rachel smiled through her tears. And what about you? What will you have? David thought about it for a moment. I think I'll have a way to keep Lisa's memory alive for Amy, and maybe I'll have a friend who understands what Lisa meant to us. As they drove away in separate cars, both of them knew that tomorrow would bring answers that would change everything. The only question now was whether they were ready for the truth. David's phone rang at exactly 9:47 a.m. on Tuesday morning. He had been staring at it for the past hour, waiting for the call from Dr. Martinez at the testing clinic. His coffee had gone cold, and he hadn't touched the breakfast he had made for himself and Amy. "Daddy, why are you so nervous?" Amy asked, looking up from her cereal bowl. She was wearing her favorite purple dress, the one Lisa had bought her for her 6th birthday. "You keep checking your phone like you're waiting for something really important?" "I am waiting for something important, sweetheart," David said, his voice tight with anxiety. "Remember the nice lady we met at the farmer's market, Rachel?" Amy's face lit up immediately. "The one who looks like Mommy. Are we going to see her again?" Before David could answer, his phone buzzed. The caller ID showed the clinic's number, and David's heart started racing so fast he thought Amy might hear it. "Hello?" he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Mr. Wilson, this is Dr. Martinez from the clinic. I have your test results, and I think you're going to want to hear this in person. Can you come in today?" David closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the moment. "Is it ... Can you tell me anything over the phone?" "I can tell you that the results are very clear," Dr. Martinez said gently. "But I think this is the kind of news that should be shared face to face. Can you be here in an hour?" David agreed, and hung up, his hands shaking slightly. He looked at Amy, who was watching him with curious eyes. "Was that about Rachel?" she asked. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to go see her today, and we're going to learn something very special." An hour later, David and Amy sat in Dr. Martinez's office, with Rachel sitting beside them. Rachel had arrived 10 minutes early, and David could see she had been crying. Her eyes were red, but there was something else there too, hope mixed with fear. Amy was coloring quietly in a corner chair, occasionally looking up at the adults with interest. She had been thrilled to see Rachel again and had immediately started chattering about her week at school. "I have to say," Dr. Martinez began, looking at the papers in front of her, "in 20 years of genetic testing, I've rarely seen results this clear-cut." She looked up at David and Rachel. "You are definitely siblings. But more than that, the genetic markers indicate that you are identical twins." The room fell completely silent except for the sound of Amy's crayon moving across the paper. David felt like all the air had been sucked out of his lungs. Even though they had suspected it, hearing it confirmed was overwhelming. Rachel covered her face with her hands and started to cry, not sad tears, but the kind of tears that come when something you've hoped for your entire life finally comes. "True, identical twins," she whispered through her fingers. "Lisa was my sister, my twin sister." Amy looked up from her coloring, noticing Rachel's tears. "Why are you crying, Rachel? Are you sad?" Rachel looked at the little girl, this precious child who was her niece, and smiled through her tears. "No, sweetheart. I'm not sad at all. I'm happy. I'm so very happy. But why?" Amy asked, setting down her crayon and walking over to Rachel. David knelt down beside his daughter, taking her small hands in his. "Amy, do you remember how you always wished you had an aunt or an uncle, someone from Mommy's family?" Amy nodded. "Mommy said she didn't have any brothers or sisters. She said it was just her and us." "Well," David said, his voice thick with emotion, "it turns out Mommy did have a sister. She just didn't know it, and that sister is Rachel." Amy's eyes grew wide as she looked back and forth between her father and Rachel. "Rachel is Mommy's sister?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Rachel is your Mommy's twin sister, which means she's your aunt?" Amy stared at Rachel for a long moment, processing this information. Then, without warning, she threw her arms around Rachel's neck and hugged her tightly. "I have an aunt," she exclaimed. "I have an aunt and she looks just like Mommy." Rachel hugged Amy back, tears streaming down her face. "And I have a niece," she whispered. "I have a beautiful, wonderful niece." Dr. Martinez watched the reunion with a smile, giving them a moment before she continued. "There's something else I should tell you," she said gently. "The genetic testing also shows that you both carry some unique markers. It's possible that your birth parents made the difficult decision to separate you because they wanted to give you both the best chance at being adopted. Twin adoptions were much more difficult to arrange 30 years ago." Rachel looked up from hugging Amy. Do you think we could find out more about our birth parents?" "That's something you could explore with the adoption agency," Dr. Martinez suggested. "With DNA evidence this strong and with both of you requesting information, they might be more willing to open the sealed records." After they left the clinic, the three of them went to the park where Lisa used to take Amy every Sunday. It seemed like the right place to be. Somewhere that held happy memories of Lisa. Amy ran ahead to the playground while David and Rachel sat on Lisa's favorite bench, the one under the big oak tree. "I keep thinking about all the times Lisa said she felt like something was missing," David said, watching Amy swing on the swings. "She used to have dreams about having a sister. She would wake up crying sometimes, saying she dreamed about a girl who looked just like her, but she could never find her." Rachel wiped fresh tears from her eyes. "I had those same dreams. I used to dream about a girl with my face and we would be playing together, but then I would wake up and she would be gone. I thought it was just my imagination, my wish to have a sister." "It wasn't your imagination," David said softly. "It was a memory. Somehow, some part of you both remembered each other." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Amy play. She had made friends with another little girl on the playground and was showing her how to go down the slide backwards. "David," Rachel said finally, "I need to ask you something, and I hope you won't think I'm overstepping." "What is it?" "I know I can't replace Lisa. I would never want to try. But Amy is my niece, and she's the only family I have left. I was wondering, would it be okay if I was part of her life? I mean, really part of her life?" David looked at Rachel, seeing not just Lisa's face, but Lisa's heart. "Rachel, I think Lisa would be so happy to know that Amy has you. You're not trying to replace her, you're honoring her memory by loving her daughter." "I want to tell Amy stories about genetics," Rachel said with a small laugh. "I want to explain why she has Lisa's eyes and your stubbornness. I want to teach her about her family history, at least what I can find out about it. And I want Amy to know that she has family who loves her," David said. "Real family, blood family, from her mother's side." Amy came running back to them, her cheeks flushed from playing. "Daddy, Rachel, look what I found." She held up a small white flower that had fallen from the tree above them. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Rachel said, taking the flower gently. "It's like the flowers Mommy used to pick," Amy said. She said white flowers meant new beginnings. David and Rachel looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. Lisa, somehow, was still guiding them, still bringing them together when they needed it most. "I think your Mommy was very wise," Rachel said, tucking the flower behind Amy's ear. "I think she's still taking care of all of us." As they walked back to their cars, Amy walking between them and holding both their hands, David felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. He felt like his family was complete again, not in the same way it had been, but in a new way that honored Lisa's memory while opening their hearts to new love. "Rachel," Amy said as they reached the parking lot, "will you come to my school play next week? I'm playing a flower in the spring garden show." Rachel looked at David, who nodded encouragingly. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," she said, and for the first time since Lisa's death, David believed that everything was going to be okay. 6 months had passed since that life-changing Saturday at the farmer's market, and David could hardly believe how much their lives had transformed. He stood in the kitchen making pancakes on a Sunday morning, listening to the sound of laughter coming from the living room. Amy and Rachel were on the floor putting together a 1,000-piece puzzle, and their voices blended together in a way that made David's heart feel full. "Daddy, Rachel found another corner piece," Amy called out excitedly. "She's really good at puzzles, just like Mommy was." David smiled, flipping the pancakes carefully. It still amazed him how naturally Rachel had fit into their lives. She had moved to their town just 3 months ago, taking a job at the elementary school where Amy went to classes. It hadn't been a difficult decision for her. She had been working as a substitute teacher anyway, and being close to Amy had become the most important thing in her life. "Breakfast is ready," David called, carrying a plate of pancakes to the dining room table. Amy jumped up from the puzzle and ran to the table, while Rachel followed more slowly, stretching her back from sitting on the floor. "These smell amazing," Rachel said, settling into what had become her usual chair. "You know, I never had homemade pancakes growing up. My adoptive parents were wonderful, but neither of them could cook." "Well, you're going to have to learn," Amy said seriously, cutting her pancakes into small pieces. "Because when I grow up and have kids, I want them to have pancakes from their grandma too." Rachel's eyes filled with tears, the way they often did when Amy said something that reminded her how much she was loved and accepted. "Grandma?" she asked softly. "Well, you're Mommy's sister, so you'll be like a grandma to my kids, right?" Amy explained with the simple logic of a child. "Or maybe an Aunt Grandma. We can figure out what to call it later." David watched Rachel's face light up with joy. In the past 6 months, he had seen her transform from a lonely woman searching for family into someone who truly belonged. Amy had done that. Amy's unconditional love and acceptance had healed something in Rachel that had been broken for 30 years. "I went to the cemetery yesterday," Rachel said quietly, looking at David. "I hope that's okay. I wanted to talk to Lisa." David nodded. "Of course it's okay. What did you tell her?" "I told her about Amy's school play and how proud she would be. I told her about the puzzle we're working on and how Amy has her stubborn streak when she can't find the right piece." Rachel smiled, and I told her thank you. "Thank you for what?" Amy asked, looking up from her pancakes. "Thank you for raising such a wonderful daughter and for loving your daddy so much that he knows how to be a good father. And thank you for somehow bringing us together, even though she's not here anymore." Amy thought about this for a moment, then nodded seriously. "Mommy always said she would take care of us no matter what. I think she sent you to take care of us too." After breakfast, they drove to the farmer's market, the same one where they had met 6 months ago. It had become their Sunday tradition, just like it had been for David and Amy before Rachel came into their lives. But now it was different. Now it was complete. Amy ran ahead to the flower stand, the same one where David had first seen Rachel. The vendor, Mrs. Peterson, had become like a grandmother to Amy over the years, and she always saved the prettiest flowers for her. "Well, if it isn't my favorite little customer," Mrs. Peterson said with a warm smile. "And Rachel, how are you? Settling in, dear?" "Very well, thank you," Rachel replied, watching Amy carefully examine the different bouquets. "I still can't believe how much my life has changed." "It's amazing what can happen when you're open to it," Mrs. Peterson said wisely. "I've been selling flowers here for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like what happened between you three. It was like watching a family find each other." Amy selected a bouquet of mixed flowers, some for their kitchen table, and some to take to Lisa's grave later. She had started doing this every Sunday, picking out flowers she thought her mother would like and telling her about her week. As they walked through the market, David noticed how comfortable they had all become with each other. Rachel helped Amy pick out the ripest apples, just like Lisa used to do. Amy held Rachel's hand while they waited in line for fresh bread. And David found himself feeling grateful instead of sad when he saw how much Amy loved her aunt. "Daddy," Amy said as they loaded their groceries into the car, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. Do you think Mommy knew about Rachel? Like, when she was alive, do you think she somehow knew she had a sister?" David thought about all the times Lisa had talked about feeling incomplete, about her dreams of having a sister, about how she was always drawn to twins whenever she saw them, I think some part of her always knew, he said finally. I think that's why she used to dream about having a sister. Her heart knew, even if her mind didn't. I think so too, Amy said. And I think that's why she made me wish for an aunt so much. She was getting me ready for Rachel. That afternoon, they visited Lisa's grave together. Amy placed the fresh flowers by the headstone while Rachel knelt down and traced Lisa's name with her finger. I brought you something, Rachel said softly, pulling out a small framed photo. It was the picture from the locket, the one showing both babies lying side by side, their tiny hands touching. She placed it next to the flowers. I thought you should have this. I made copies for all of us, but I wanted you to have the original. Amy sat down cross-legged beside the grave, like she always did when she visited her mother. Mommy, I have so much to tell you, she began. Rachel taught me how to braid my hair the way you used to. And she makes the same face you did when you were concentrating really hard. And she laughs just like you, especially when I tell her silly jokes. David and Rachel listened as Amy chattered to her mother about school, about friends, about the new bike she had learned to ride. Rachel wiped away tears as Amy told Lisa about how happy she was to have an aunt who looked just like her. And Daddy is happy too, Amy continued. He doesn't cry at night anymore, and he smiles more. I think he likes having Rachel around because she helps him remember the good things about you instead of just being sad. David felt his throat tighten. Amy was more observant than he had realized. She was right. Having Rachel in their lives had changed his grief from something that consumed him to something that connected him to Lisa in a positive way. As they walked back to the car, Rachel slipped her hand into David's. It wasn't romantic. They both understood that. It was the gesture of family, of people who had been through something difficult together and had come out stronger on the other side. David, Rachel said as they drove home, I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about this for weeks, and I finally made a decision. What is it? I want to legally change my last name. I want to be Rachel Taylor, like Lisa was. I want to honor her memory and be part of her family name. David felt his heart swell with emotion. Rachel, I think Lisa would love that, and I think Amy would too. Can I really do that? Amy asked from the back seat. Can Rachel have the same last name as Mommy? Yes, sweetheart. If that's what Rachel wants, she can become Rachel Taylor. Then we'll really be a family, Amy exclaimed. We'll have the same last name and everything. That evening, as they sat together on the couch watching Amy's favorite movie, David reflected on how much their lives had changed. 6 months ago, he had been a lonely widower trying to raise his daughter while carrying the weight of grief. Amy had been a little girl who missed her mother and wished for extended family. Now, they were something new, not the same family they had been before, but a family that honored Lisa's memory while embracing the love that had brought them. Together, Rachel had filled a space in their lives that they hadn't even known was empty. Rachel, Amy said sleepily, curled up between David and her aunt. I'm glad you look like Mommy. It makes me feel like she's still here with us. I'm glad too, sweetheart, Rachel whispered, stroking Amy's hair. And I promise you, as long as I'm here, you'll always have someone who loved your mommy as much as you do. As Amy drifted off to sleep, David looked at Rachel and saw not just Lisa's face, but the future, a future where Amy would grow up knowing she was surrounded by love, where she would have someone to tell her stories about her mother and her family, and where the love that had brought them together would continue to grow. They had found each other through the most unlikely of circumstances, but David knew now that it hadn't been luck or coincidence. It had been love, Lisa's love, reaching across time and space to make sure her daughter and her sister found each other when they needed it most. And in finding each other, they had found something none of them had expected, a new beginning that honored the past while embracing the future, built on the foundation of love that would never end.